Welcome to your friendly neighborhood historian, where we discuss just enough history to inform, intrigue, and entertain. I'm Bill Petro. The history of Saint Telemachus, the monk who ended the Roman Gladiatorial Games. January 1st, AD 404, marked Rome's last known gladiatorial games. What part did an obscure Christian monk from the East play in this epic change in Roman entertainment? This is the story of Saint Telemachus, or pronounced Telemachus, whose festival is celebrated on January 1st and has been remembered throughout the last 1600 years. You may have never heard of the name, or you may know it as the name of the son of Homer's Odysseus, or Ulysses. Telemachus was tutored and protected by Mentor, his father's servant, while his father was away fighting the Trojan War. Here's the background of the little-known monk, Saint Telemachus, how he brought an end to the imperial gladiatorial games, and how the story has been adapted over the centuries, told many different times, until the story was used 40 years ago by an American president at an international event. The church historian Theodoret, bishop in Syria, first told the story in the 5th century in his succinctly titled work, Ecclesiastical History, a History of the Church in 5 books from AD 322 to the death of Theodore, AD 427. Theodoret relates how a monk from the eastern part of the Roman Empire, named Telemachus, came to Rome and saw the gladiatorial games when, after gazing upon the combat from the amphitheater, he descended into the arena and tried to separate the gladiators. The sanguinary spectators, possessed by the demon who delights in the effusion of blood, were irritated at the interruption of their cruel sport and stoned him who would have occasioned the cessation. The amphitheater mentioned here suggests the Colosseum, or more properly, the Flavian Amphitheater in Rome. The Latin word arena means sand, refers to that sand that covered the wooden floor to absorb the blood of the games. Theodoret continues, after being appraised of this circumstance, the admirable emperor numbered him with the victorious martyrs and abolished these iniquitous spectacles. The emperor here was the Christian emperor Honorius, the son of Emperor Theodosius I. The gladiatorial games had been ended several times previously, though unsuccessfully. Numerous Christian emperors, including Constantine, who first made Christianity a legal religion in Rome, Constantius, and Julian, all of these had abolished the games. Even the Emperor Theodosius I, who later made Christianity the official religion of Rome in the 4th century, published an edict against the games. But it was not until his son, Honorius, who recognized Telemachus's martyrdom, that the games ended. This time it stuck, partially because 6 years later, the Visigoths under Alaric sacked Rome, a significant event in the decline of the Roman Empire. Though Theodoret wrote his story more than a millennium and a half ago, it has been famously recounted several times and for different purposes, including during our generation. In the 8th and 9th centuries, a popular form of medieval literature was martyrology, or the story of the life and death of those who have given their life for the Christian faith. For example, the martyrology of Oddo, Archbishop of Vienne in Lotharingia in the mid-9th century, relates how Saint Telemachus, which was another name for Telemachus, opposed the games and was slain by the gladiators on the orders of Alpius, prefect of Rome, during the reign of Emperor Theodosius, who we mentioned was the father of Honorius. The place and date match in this story, but not the year. Was this the same martyr? Ato's work and chronology are based on that of the Venerable Bede, who is from what we now call England, a century earlier. In the 16th century, over 1,000 years after the martyrdom of Telemachus, in the 16th century, John Foxe included him in his well-known Foxe's Book of Martyrs. The context of this book is significant. Foxe was contemporary of Queen Mary Tudor of England, also known as Bloody Mary. She earned this name for killing over 300 Protestant leaders as she assumed the English crown, following the death of her very Protestant half-brother, King Edward VI. Foxe's book recounts the martyrdom of many in the West, emphasizing the 14th through the 16th centuries, ending with Bloody Mary. In his book in 1563, he expands the story to say that Telemachus came to Rome's churches to spend Christmas and was stirred by the thousands who flocked to see the gladiatorial games. Despite his failure to convince them of their cruelty and wickedness, his death, quote, turned the hearts of the people, close quote, and opened their eyes to the brutality of their conduct and, quote, the hideous aspect of their favorite vice, close quote. As he fell dead in the Colosseum, no further gladiatorial games were held there. There's a 19th century story of Telemachus from Alfred Lord Tennyson, poet and laureate of Great Britain during Queen Victoria's reign. He relates how the monk felt called by God to leave his seclusion and seek out the fire of the West, the great Christian city of Rome. While he was there, he was borne along by a crowd of men and was drawn into the Colosseum. Amongst the slaves, the dead animals, the dust, and the blood, he saw gladiators viewed by 80,000 spectators. He moved down the stairs and into the arena, placing himself between the combatants. He cried out, "Forbear, in the great name of him who died for men, Christ Jesus." As silence fell, it was replaced by the snake-like hiss of the audience, replaced by the deep roar of a breaking sea as a shower of rocks from the spectators stoned him dead, followed by silence. Alfred Lord Tennyson relates, his dream became a deed that woke the world. Throughout the amphitheater ran a shudder of shame that came to the attention of Honorius, who decreed that Rome no more should wallow in this old lust of paganism and make her festal hour dark with the blood of man who murdered man. There's a 20th century story of Telemachus, though. In 1984, American President Ronald Reagan told the story of the little monk at the annual National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. His story is the narrative of a Hollywood epic, as it could only be orated by a Hollywood actor that he once was. At this international event, which originally began in 1953, President Reagan recounted the story in this way. This power of prayer can be illustrated by the story that goes back to the 4th century. The monk followed a crowd into the Colosseum, and he saw the gladiators come forth, standing before the emperor, and say, "We who are about to die salute you." And he realized they were going to fight to the death for the entertainment of the crowds. Telemachus cried out, "In the name of Christ, stop!" And his voice was lost in the tumult there in the great Colosseum. And as the games began, the crowd saw this scrawny little figure making his way out to the gladiators and saying over and over again, "In the name of Christ, stop." And they thought it was part of the entertainment. And at first they were amused, but then, when they realized it wasn't, they grew belligerent and angry. And as he was pleading with the gladiators, "In the name of Christ, stop," one of them plunged his sword into his body. And as he fell to the sand of the arena in death, his last words were, "In the name of Christ, stop." And suddenly a strange thing happened. The gladiators stood looking at this tiny form lying in the sand. A silence fell over the Colosseum. And then, someplace in the upper tiers, an individual stood up and made his way to an exit and left. And others began to follow. And in the dead silence, everyone left the Colosseum. That was the last battle to the death between gladiators in the Roman Colosseum. Never again did anyone kill, or did men kill each other for the entertainment of the crowd. One tiny voice that could hardly be heard above the tumult. "In the name of Christ, stop." It is something we should be saying to each other throughout the world today. How's that for a New Year's resolution? Thank you for listening. I'm Bill Petro, your friendly neighborhood historian. You can find more details on this topic and others on my website at billpetro.com.